So Joe Biden unveiled his Lift Every Voice plan for Black America this week, which includes a $900 million 8-year grant program to fight gun violence in cities and more federal contracting opportunities for African-American-owned businesses.
His plan has faced some criticism, some including friend of the show and the funky academic himself, Irami Osei-Frimpong. He joins us now via Skype to talk about that plan. Irami, what about this plan gives you pause? What is it about it that you don't think lives up to the moment?
All right, so we have to actually consider the scope of the problem. There's a great article that came out called The Color of Wealth. They did it in a few different cities. In Boston, it was sponsored by the Federal Reserve. It was sponsored by different institutions in different cities. But in Boston, they found that Black families have a net worth of $8, which, might just not sound like a lot of money, but you could say well, maybe everyone in Boston's poor, because in order to understand how much money is, you need to compare it to other money. So Black families in Boston have $8, whereas white families in Boston have a median of $247,000.
Wow.
Right? So you have to understand what that disparity means. That disparity means predatory conditions. So even if everyone around you only is worth $8, that means that people worth $250,000 at any point in time can buy you. Right? Mm-hmm. They can buy your house. They can just move you out of Boston whenever they want you to. And if you have some sort of legal challenge, you have your $8 lawyers versus their $250,000 lawyers. So you don't really have rights. You don't really have any sort of standing in the United States with that kind of discrepancy. And that's what really inequality means. And it's not just Boston. In Los Angeles, they did the numbers, and it's Black families who are not the children of immigrants and immigrants themselves, but actual descendants of slaves, are worth about $3,500. And this is Los Angeles. It's not cheap in Los Angeles. So if you're only worth $3,500, that means you don't really have any assets. Versus white families who are worth $355,000 in Los Angeles. So it's the same sort of inequality and the same sort of predatory conditions. And so how do you make this situation whole so that Black communities are not just pretty much at the whim of their white neighbors? And Los Angeles, this is very clear because the homeless population in Los Angeles, if you don't know, it's pretty much Black. I think it's anywhere from 50 to 60% of the homeless and strikingly Black male in Los Angeles are Black. So we need to understand that this actually matters. So we need a we need a policy situation that meets the moment and meets the problem. And the question is, does this Lift Every Voice plan, which is what Joe Biden is calling it, actually secure the social conditions to realize freedom? Because if you're in that predatory or that prey condition, you're not really free. You're just kind of hoping that your white neighbors don't have something that they want, because then they will take it and you can't really redress it. Right,
and so does it meet the moment, Irami?
Yeah. What's going on?
It doesn't meet the moment. The Lift Every Voice plan. This is important because we're looking at freedom, right? Lift Every Voice was a song that was debuted at Lincoln's birthday, and then was as a poem, and then made into a song after his assassination about 20 years later, for a birthday celebration, then made it into a song. So, does this program actually secure Black people the social conditions for freedom? Right? And that's important because right now, everybody in the United States is free, yet COVID does something to our social conditions so that a lot of people don't feel free at the moment. So right now, all of America is feeling like Black people felt like, well, pretty much Black people feel like today, but Black people felt like after Reconstruction. You have formal freedom, but you don't have the social conditions to actually make that freedom move in a meaningful way. So let's talk about some of the provisions of this plan, right? So they offer retirement incentives, right? Because the reasoning was that, we need to incentivize Black people to retire, when it's actually, we don't make enough money. So our savings rates, Black people's savings rates at most income levels are superior to our white counterparts. Our savings are, it's not, there's a lot of propaganda out there saying we buy Jordans too much. It's the $100 Jordans, or it's the movie tickets or the hair weaves that do it. No, it's Black life. You can only save so much when you're making $9 an hour. Right. So it's not savings incentives we need. We need a plan to actually secure real wages and Black people good jobs. Right. And as you know, being poor actually creates multipliers that make it more expensive to be poor.
Yes.
So that's the problem. So it's not, we don't need retirement incentives. and we don't need tax cuts. We need actual serious plans that gets money through the community. And then they're talking about tripling Title I funding, which actually sounds, well, let's talk about the juvenile justice, right? So they talk about juvenile justice. It sounds good, right? We're going to put $1 billion a year into juvenile justice. And I don't know, when the guy who's famous for writing the crime bill talks about juvenile justice, that just sounds to me like a lot more cops and a lot more toys for cops, and then a lot more buildings to house black kids with like very expensive surveillance equipment and drones and SWAT teams. So when you're putting money for justice, and you're trying to do that as a racial justice program, it just sounds like you're going to end up with more policing. And more policing does not actually put money into black people's coffers. So $1 billion a year for juvenile justice doesn't really tell me that they're going to meet the moment in terms of like actually securing black people good jobs at fair wages. So there's that. So that money I just see like growing a carceral enterprise with maybe nicer jails, with community centers.
I do want to get to what,
jails.
Right. I want to get to the broader thing that you're trying to talk about here, which is that you're saying that there's not a plan to address not even the systemic, because I think that's almost like a contrived word at this point, but the beginning points of failure for so many people in the black community. What are the type of solutions that somebody like yourself would be looking for in order to address those solutions?
All right, so you need to look at the legacy of degradation and trust in the black community, because right now black communities don't trust their institutions, and that's a problem. So you need to look at what kind of solutions would actually secure trust in the black community in public institutions, and two, just kind of what kind of institutions would actually secure black people rights. So you need something like a federal job guarantee, because right now the only real middle class black neighborhood, black community in America is outside of D.C. Like I grew up in Baldwin Hills, California, and that's supposed to be where black money is. My mom was a single nurse, so not really. But the only real black stable money in the United States at a community level, not just individual black families surrounded by white people, is in D.C. because of government jobs, right? So like you need to understand that the private labor market does not absorb black communities at fair labor and wage conditions. So we need something like a federal job guarantee. That's actually going to meet the moment. And there are a few other policies, but in order to get to these policies, you need to actually think about how, like, what you do as a politician in order to get America thinking on the level that America needs to think on. I was in some friends of mine were in this meeting where they talked about, where the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, and Biden's people were talking about what to put in this Lift Every Voice plan. And they were told, the people in my meeting were told, no, we have to be realistic. We can't ask for things that we actually need. We need to be realistic, and we need to be pragmatic. And I'll tell you right now, there's nothing about justice in America that came from that kind of fake pragmatism or realism.
Right.
It's not like the founding fathers were thinking, well, you know, we can't emancipate all the colonies. Let's just go for like some of the northern ones, and like we'll leave Virginia and we'll get Massachusetts, but like we can't actually get Connecticut. So no, you go for what's right.
Where do
you
you think
organize
that
for what's right, and then you make your claim, you make your fight, and then what happens, what's real, is what happens out of that. Trump's people voted for him because of a wall. Was a wall realistic? No.
Right.
But you know what?
Well,
he's proud of the concentration camps.
Because we see that. I mean, we see that all throughout the Democratic Party. I mean, we saw that Obama was famous with negotiating with himself before he ever sat down at the table, right? Where does that come from?
Well, yeah, I mean, that comes from a huge cynicism with respect to if any of this justice. So where does it come from? Let's be clear. The only way black people were free was not from negotiating. Negotiating got us the Missouri Compromise. It did not get us freedom. It took a war to get us freedom. And in order to secure that freedom, it took Reconstruction. And then we gave up on Reconstruction because we decided that unless you're willing to kill white people from time to time, black people are never going to be free. So we'll just kind of negotiate on their terms. And that's what we've been ever since. That we've always just kind of been negotiating on what white people feel like maybe they will give us. That's not how white people negotiate with everybody else, by the way. They negotiate based on what's right. We negotiate based on what white people might feel like. And that is going to be a secure problem. And we also under-negotiate because we don't feel comfortable pressing white people because white people are scary. So under-negotiating looks like Barack Obama saying like, well, you know, if I just give them Merrick Garland, they'll be reasonable with me, and I'll get a fair hearing, and I can't ask for anything like a real Supreme Court justice who would actually do good stuff for America. I'll give them Merrick Garland, and they'll be reasonable for me. And you know what? Obama gave them Merrick Garland, and what did they do? Saagar, what did they do with Merrick Garland?
That's right. They held him up and never confirmed him.
Never
They
even
held
brought him up.
confirmed it because you've got like you don't pre-negotiate. If it were me, if I were president, I'd say, here's Anita Hill. Tell me why Anita Hill shouldn't be the next Supreme Court justice. No, tell everyone why Anita Hill shouldn't be the next Supreme Court justice. If they're going to do that to you, you make them fight for it and you make them embarrass themselves. You don't pre-negotiate like a sucker and then have them make suckers for you, because then what happens is you just confuse the electorate about what's right and what's wrong. Because that's how you get, if you're Obama, that's how you get Donald Trump to be your predecessor. You've succeeded in confusing the electorate so much about what they should fight for and how they end up electing Trump. And that's not just Trump. That's how you lose 816 state legislative seats nationwide, because Democrats were so confused about what to fight for that the Republicans who knew exactly what to fight for, Cory Gardner and Ted Cruz know exactly what to fight for. That's how you get beat by them. And so you need actually to clarify the fight, not just promise what you could deliver, because you don't know what you could deliver.
Right.
You don't know. You promise, you clarify the fight, what you should fight for and why, and let the voters make up your mind.
That's actually what voters are looking for too. That's all they want to know. People aren't stupid. They know there's no guarantees, right? But they at least want someone who's going to make a clear stand about what they're going to fight for. Irami, it's always great to have you.
We got to head out, Irami. I'm sorry. I know we always have to end on this.
Thanks, Irami. We'll have you back. Have a good one.
All right.
Take care.
See ya.
And we'll have more Rising for you after this.